Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, chaps. Rich is back from holiday and, more importantly, is active with his wildcard. Rich, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, buddy. Yeah, hectic week going on for not. I'm not the only one who's wildcarding, am I? So
You are
pretty
not.
much everyone in that I've come across seems to be, but maybe there's one or two out there that are holding on to it. But yeah, been busy with it.
Plenty
Definitely.
to talk about on wildcard. And with Adam working today, we are joined again this week by Fantasy Football Hub contributor, Twitter thread and Spaces extraordinaire, the wonderful Jian Batra. Jian, a sparkling Green Arrow debut last week cut short due to the awful and sudden news about the Queen passing, but you're back. Is your wildcard active?
It is. It is. It was a close one. And I was probably in one of the strongest positions not to do it, but at the end of the line, the template wildcard team, it got me. So it took over, and yeah, I'm on the wildcard.
Superb. So we haven't got any violin moments, obviously, this week because the game week was canned last week. So we will kick right off and get into wildcard chat with Rich Pickens. So firstly, Rich, I suppose the first question, I'm sure all three of us have gone through this in our heads, but why are we wildcarding this week in game week 8 ahead of game week 9? Just interested in your thoughts on that first, Rich.
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, from my position, I was looking to wildcard during the international break. I thought that was my original plan. However, I spent quite a lot of last week, wondering which games were going to be postponed in game week 8, how badly that was going to affect my team. I had, I think, 7 outfield players who didn't have a game this weekend with my old team. I had Pascal Gross, Zaha, plus 2 Liverpool and 2 Chelsea players, like a lot of teams, and also the non-playing Archer still sitting up front for me. So basically 7 out with 2 free transfers. It still looked, too much of a stretch to get a side out. So even -4 to get 10 or -8 to get 11. I think that coupled with the, the fixture swings that we see we're now trying to take advantage of, I think that was enough to say, well, let's do it a week early. It was quite an easy decision to make. If it had been 5 or 6, you start to think about saving it with 2 transfers and getting through, and you will see that some people have got that option, but for me it was quite an easy decision to bring it forward. And then finally, just one small personal circumstances. I think I'm on a plane on the 1st of October.
Oh wow!
In the morning of, and when you're doing your wild card, you got to do it right up till the deadline, right? So basically, you don't want to be on an aircraft when the last hour of chances to change it come in. So not ideal for me to wildcard during the international break. So that was the final personal circumstance that made me do it this week.
Good stuff. And what about you, Jan? Because I know you've been having an hour, haven't you?
Yeah, so I tried to really simplify the problem. And the way I looked at it was that, are you going to get more? And I looked at it in terms of expected points. So is the expected points increase of your game week 8 wildcard team over your current team, is it that greater than the additional security and information you get from the international break combined with your game week 9 wildcard team compared to a normal game week 9 team? Now, the game week, what I noticed was when you're drafting, game week 8 wildcard teams and game week 9 wildcard teams were very similar. There's not too much difference. So it essentially is the expected points of this week worth in excess the extra value and information of the international break. And because I think this international break will be slightly different, given that the World Cup's around the corner, I didn't think it was. I thought prices would be volatile at the start and then calm down. So I thought I may as well go for it this week if I'm going to at all.
Yeah, same.
What was the actual difference, just out of interest, with your team?
It was just like a theoretical thing. So I just set up an equation, and I saw, like, for me, it was roughly about 12 points, I'd say. So I was quite pessimistic on purpose with my wildcard team, just so that, like, I wouldn't over exaggerate it, and it was around 12 points. So I thought 12 points was more than enough for me to go for it.
I think for me, one of the main reasons was I looked at a game week 8 team. So I had 2 free transfers. I could have got in Trippier and Mitrovic with my 2 free transfers, which would have been, sort of 7 11th or 8 11th towards the wildcard team I want anyway. But even then, I would still only have 10. I would have to take a hit to get 11 out. And as we see time and again in these weeks, when we're in these blank game weeks, like we saw last year, I think Rich remembers this really well. I think it was game week 30 when you're like, oh, well, I've got 9, I've got 10, and you only end up with 6, right? Because of circumstance. It happens all the time.
You reminded me, Fergie. So I mean, I remember listening to a lot of content that week. There was people coming out with narratives going, "Oh, it's going to be. I think I'll be fine with 7 or 8 this week, game week 30. You know, it won't be too bad. You know, if you look at who's missing out, it was an absolute nightmare.
It never works out like that, does it?
Go in with 7 or 8, then you get a player sent off. You get a couple of players not starting. You're down to 4 or 5, and then they don't perform. You get no points. You get literally no points.
This is it.
It's very possible. So if people are in that predicament, I know we're saying don't take free hits, but rather than have 4 or 5 out, it's got to be an option.
I think so, and that was one of the main reasons for me, along with the fact that I like to be a bit aggressive with it. I think there's points to be had this weekend. So just for example, Pope. I think Pope at home to Bournemouth, a point waiting to be had. I would have had to play Ward, for example. Apologies, my camera looks to be playing up a little bit for those on YouTube, but hopefully it's bearable. Pope as an example. There's other players, maybe players like Bowen, Maddison, and players along those lines where I think we got an opportunity. They've got we will probably want them in game week 9 or maybe 10 as well. We got the opportunity to get in early, get some early points on the board, go into the international break rather than a small red because we had to take a -4 and it didn't really work out, and then wildcard into a very similar team for game week 9, which is what I think a lot of people will be doing. I just think take the hit early in terms of maybe get a nice green, go into the international break. You still have an excellent team. As long as your price points are there, you can even shift around, for game week 9 and game week 10, I think it's fine. So I did a similar thing to you, Jian, as well, just in terms of looking at points, and it wasn't that close. I'm doing something quite dangerous, I think, like taking out Jesus and Tony, for example, and putting in another couple of forwards in their place, which could obviously go either way, 50-50, right? But you just got to go for it sometimes. It's gut feel as well as everything else, right? And I think Isaac at home to Bournemouth. If you think of the ownership of some of the players, like he's really low. He's like 4% owned. He could really go off this week, whereas Jesus haven't quite looked at it from an FPL points view over the last month or so, has he? So I just think a combination of those things is why I'm going for it for the wildcard for week 8. So looking at the fixtures for this weekend, obviously we know that Palace, Leeds, Chelsea, Liverpool, United, and Brighton have all got blanks. I feel sorry for people who brought in Rashford. Looking at home to Leeds, I was looking for a really nice fixture ahead of game week 7, wasn't it? But Fulham are top of the shop for the next 6 game weeks in terms of ease of fixtures. Leicester are second, Villa are third, Bournemouth are fourth, West Ham are fifth, Newcastle are sixth. Now, observationally, both on my own wild card and looking around the community and content we've seen, the vast majority of these teams, so Leicester, Villa, Bournemouth, and West Ham in particular, 4 of those top 6 have been off form so far this season, right? Yeah, we're packing our team with these players. Fulham and Newcastle have been good. I did notice Newcastle's defensive stats, even though they've kept a few clean sheets and and defenders have got some points. The defensive stats haven't been too good either, which is a bit of a concern for me. And right down the bottom, Brighton, United, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Man City. That is a combination of some blanks as well, but obviously some fixture swing. So, Jan, can I come for you first in terms of teams you're targeting? Because I know you were pretty hot on Bowen last week, for example, who has shown nothing all season. Are we at a danger of going in on these? And who are the teams you're targeting for your wild card?
Yeah, so there's a few things to dissect there. Firstly, just something that sprung to mind. With Fulham obviously having a very good run, I'd be slightly cautious about starting Andreas Pereira this week if you're on a wild card. I think a lot of people are benching Maddison for him, and I think that's a little bit dangerous just because Fulham have been, I'm not sure on the exact statistics, but Fulham have been considerably better at home than they have away, especially with the style of football they play. So that's just one thing to note. Well, like you said, Bowen, I really, really like Bowen as a pick. I was very impressed by his performance against Spurs. I thought he attacked the right half space more. There was more tempo and rhythm to his style of play, and just in general, his involvement was really good. if you go on the Hub's website and the player comparison tool, you can obviously see his stats, but in a graphic form.
Yeah,
And
goals, assist nil. I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you look at stuff like his shots and his XG, he basically did twice as well in game week 5 and 6 for those type of statistics than he did in game week 1 to 4. And I think that was a real positive. So I'm bullish on him, and I like the fixtures. I know they've got Wolves somewhere sandwiched in there, obviously Everton next week, and also Southampton. So I like that a lot. And the other one is one you mentioned earlier, Isaac. Now we'll touch on Newcastle as a whole. Obviously, like you said, Newcastle's defensive statistics haven't been great, but in a way, I think that can be a blessing in disguise. Pope obviously has a high ceiling because of that. He can accumulate a lot of saves and hence bonus points. And I think I'd rather have that factor in there so that he can accumulate a big haul, because a big haul can offset 2 or 3 clean sheets from a normal keeper. And then finally, Isaac at 4.4% effective ownership. I think a 7 million striker at home to Bournemouth, and the fact that he's looked so sharp, I think he's definitely one to get on. So those are the fixtures I like in particular, the West Ham and the Newcastle ones.
Okay. And what about you, Rich?
There's been quite a lot of content creator abuse going on over the Bowen pick, isn't he? He's very, very popular amongst a lot of the community who are writing or podcasting this week. And look, I mean, I certainly think he's on an audition this evening, for West Ham's game. I'm going to watch that game. He may not get 90 minutes, or he may not even start, but hopefully he'll get some minutes and we can have another look at him, because I'm not sure. I think all of the there's a lot of options in the midfield around the 8 million bracket that we can choose from, and Bowen is probably the 3rd or 4th choice for me at the moment. He's in my draft, but I'm not sure. I want some more information. In fact, I might, based on what Jian just said, I might just go back and watch the Tottenham highlights and see how he looks, because I'm a bit more of an eye test player, and I must admit I haven't had my eye on him at all until he's come up on this wild card. So yeah, Bowen is an option. Again, I'm not so convinced with Isaac. He's had 1.5 games or 1 and a bit games, scored 1 goal. If I was to go the De Bruyne route with the wild card, then I'd probably prefer Tony as a talisman pick there in that spot, just as with a bit more long-term view up to the World Cup. So in an earlier draft I had this week didn't have Isaac in it. It had Tony in there, and I don't think there's much to choose between them. I mean, you just got a hat trick out of him, didn't you, Fergie, about 2 weeks? The last time the guys kicked a ball seems ages ago now, but he's just coming off a hat trick, isn't he, in game week 6? So I think I prefer Tony to Isaac, but yeah, great fixture this week, so I can see why people are going there.
It's great for the next 3. I think is why I'm favouring him over Tony. So home to Bournemouth, away to Fulham, home to Brentford. They're 3 of the top worst defense. Sorry, 3 of the top 4 worst defenses in the next 3. Sure. And eye test wise, you mentioned eye test, Rich. Go and watch him. If you haven't watched him on the highlights, he looks mega sharp. He's I've been really impressed with him. So, but I get
okay. No, absolutely. I was partly coming on this pod because I thought I'd have my arm twisted, or I certainly want to have a bit of persuasion. I'm very open minded about this. I think we've got a lot of options in most of the positions, and none of them are bad picks, are they? So exactly. We're racking our brains trying to wring the last bit of advantage out of a Kane versus KDB, or an Isaac versus Tony, or whatever. They're all good options. It's just what do you want to max out with a wild card? It's very easy to focus on the immediate fixtures and gain for this 1 week in front of us, versus setting up a longer term team and saving transfers down the line and that kind of thing. So different ways to go with it, and perhaps a slightly weaker team this week will help you navigate game week 12, for example. So there's lots on my mind in that respect.
I think looking at a few players then. So now we've got the total predicted points up for the next 4 game weeks. I purposely haven't put in game week 12 because obviously that's skewed with United and Arsenal. But just a few players I'm interested in as maybe different sort of options. So one we've mentioned already. So you mentioned Bowen. I think Paqueta at 6 million could be a really interesting alternative. I was looking at his stats. His stats weren't superb for like his old clubs in terms of goal scoring and assisted, but for 6 million, I do wonder whether we can afford to kind of wait, because I think away to Everton, home to Wolves, I think are two tough fixtures before you go into Fulham and I think it's Brentford or something like that. I think you can afford to wait personally, and I think if you can get on board with, if we can just observe over the next two, you may find yourself saving a couple of million there. St. Maximin was one as well I was really interested in. I think he's 6.4 million, so he's actually dropped in the start of the season, but obviously, he's a big player for Newcastle. I think he might be a bit of a risk for this weekend in terms of injury, hamstring strain, but when he does play, I think he's looked really, really good. And I think he's a really good option here as well. Interestingly, predicted points for the next 4 game weeks. The usual suspect at the top, right? Haaland, De Bruyne, Son, Kane, Foden, Mitrovic, Cancelo, and then Isaac is actually in there as well, which is really interesting based on previous stats. Bowen is in there as well, just below Isaac. Vardy is in there, so Leicester's fixtures following this week, obviously really, really good. Saka, Martinelli, and Jesus. So it's easy to forget the Arsenal guys this week. I say easy to forget this week. That game against Brentford, I think, is being underrated. I think
same.
Brentford's defensive stats have actually been quite poor, and I'm taking out Jesus and keeping Martinelli, I think. Watkins, Maddison, Luka Dean in there as well. But Mitrovic is someone we haven't touched on yet. Is he just like one of the first names on your wild cards at the moment, Jian?
Yeah, I think at that price as well, just given that he's one like a half a tier lower than Antonio and Isaac, makes him an even better option. He's the perfect example of talisman theory. Penalties, everything kind of goes through him when they attack. Great finishing, and just scores a lot of goals, and he's looked really sharp so far. So I think he's definitely one that should pretty much be a lock on the wild card. A couple other things about those expected points. I know Vardy's higher than Maddison, but I think Vardy, and it's quite clear to see, he's on a bit of a decline now.
Yeah, I agree with
maybe the age is catching up to him. Maddison, on the complete other hand, has been their absolute talisman and has scored a ridiculous amount of points in 2022 as a whole. So I think if you're going to go for one to target that amazing fixture on, it'd be him. So I think Maddison's definitely a good pick there, probably over Vardy. And one thing to be a little bit careful about is Watkins. I know he's on that list and he's fairly high up, but he has stung managers a lot of times. And with how Villa are playing, I'd be a little bit careful about him.
That's fair as well. I've noticed Leon Bailey, who I sold the week before last, has suddenly come back on the radar. Obviously scored a really good goal against City. Villa's fixtures are really good. Amazing price. It's tough with Gerrard because you never know if he's going to play or not, but 4.7 million, really good fixtures. Rich, I think Leon Bailey might be someone you've been looking at or are looking at. What's your thoughts on him?
I was asking Adam about him, in the chat this week, but I think Bailey's a good option if you're maybe I've seen quite a few drafts you're trying to cram in a threemium this week, with De Bruyne, Kane, and Haaland. Yeah. And if you sort of run with Bailey and Andreas and a couple of 4.0s at the back, you can do it. You can get there. Well, you can if your team value is better than mine, but it's possible to wedge it in. I mean, I'm still not in favour of that just because of the lack of balance across the team, but it is possible, and that's one way to use Bailey. He's got a good fixture this weekend, so you can play him, and he's an option. He's not in my current draft, but he's so cheap that and the Villa's fixtures up to the World Cup are great, so he's a good option. Again,
they feel like a team similar to Leicester and West Ham who haven't been doing anything yet, but we're kind of relying on previous history and knowledge of their team and their players, that when they do turn it on, they can be really good. But there's been nothing much to shout about around, Villa, Leicester, all these kind of players that we're kind of hanging our hats a little bit. West Ham's another one. But what other kind of players, Rich, have you been looking at in your wildcard? What kind of structure as well? Because obviously big at the back has been massive for the first 6-7 weeks of the season. I think it worked out really well in like one game week, but other than that, it's been tough. Are you erring more towards like a 3-4-3 or a 4-4-2, and what kind of players are you looking at?
Yeah, I've switched it up to a 3-4-3. That's the way I played for 16 years. Pretty much, people always try big at the back at the beginning of every season, and then they just have to move money out of the defence, or are forced to move money out of the defence as things don't quite go to plan. That seems to be exactly what's happened again this year. And so the wild card's the obvious chance to restructure that money. So yeah, I've gone skinny there and got a couple of cheap defenders in there in the draft at the moment. I'm slightly worried about the fourth defender spot, really. It's the fourth defender and the fourth mid, isn't it? Those seem to be the problem positions with drafting this week. But yeah, 3 up top. And actually, when we come to review our drafts, you'll see I've kind of purposefully gone different to you two, just so we can have a discussion about it. Really, so I'm not convinced on it, but yeah, at the moment, I'm favouring the Kane as the over De Bruyne as the go for it option. Really,
well, that's an excellent little segue there, Rich, because Kane versus...
Can I just put a light on? Because I feel like I'm sitting in the dark here. The sun's gone in outside, and I'll just put a little bit of light
on. There's a lot of chat around St. Maximum and Field Beating Over. I did look at it this morning. I saw he is injury prone, and he's currently flagged 50% because of a hamstring injury. I think is the problem, but I do think that's an interesting point. But Kane versus De Bruyne, looking head-to-head so far this season, just at the key stats, played 6 each. Kane, 5 goals, 1 assist. De Bruyne, 1 goal, 4 assists. Shots and shots on target, Kane outperforms De Bruyne. Shots in the box, 16 for Kane, 6 for De Bruyne. XG, massively in favour of Kane. XA, as you'd expect, in favour of De Bruyne. Big chances, again on Kane's side, 7-3. Big chances created, 7-3 for De Bruyne, and key passes on De Bruyne's side. For the actual fixture this game week, which I think is why I personally think that if Kane had a harder game this week, I personally think it would be a bit of a no-brainer to go for De Bruyne, because Kane's fixtures after this are both away, and they're quite difficult, I think, for 3 or 4 game weeks. But, if you look at that, if you look at the stats for this game week only, I personally think that Kane is the better choice. Obviously, when you set up a wild card, structurally, this is where it's important, right? Because it's obviously much easier to get from De Bruyne to Salah. So, Rich, can I just ask you first on your thoughts on Kane versus De Bruyne, or Kane versus the premium mid?
Yeah, this is the key decision, I think, for everybody this week. Going back to sort of why we wildcard as well, I think you've got to go for it a bit on the wild card. I hope you agree with that. I think if you just sort of go template, a slightly different template to everybody else, and you sort of get some Liverpool FOMO and some City FOMO, and you just sort of, people who haven't got a wild card can just switch Salah to De Bruyne, can't they? That's probably the easy single transfer to make this week, and then you can go back to him if you want to next week. But I just think that the majority of non-wildcarders probably won't get Kane in. It might be too difficult for them to stretch. They're probably happy with their forward lines already, and they're playing some 7 million guys and that sort of thing. That fixture, Spurs normally thrash Leicester, or there's normally loads of goals in the game. And Kane's record against them is immense. I might even captain him. I literally have not so scared of Haaland. I've got a couple of stats. I'm not really a stat man, but, if you look at Wolves, for instance, who are City's opponents, they have conceded the lowest number of goals in the Premier League. They've only conceded 4 goals in 6 matches. Yeah. By contrast, Leicester have conceded 16 goals in 6 matches and are the second worst. So just look at those 2 fixtures before you talk about Haaland versus Kane. Yeah. So you've got to consider captaining Kane.
I agree.
With that opposition. Just before we get into the expected points and all, it literally, you've got to just look at the goals that have been scored against those 2 teams. And for me, this week is a massive opportunity to sort of say, well, I'm going to be a brave soldier. I'm going to stick the armband on Kane, and it's still got Haaland, but I hope he doesn't go off. And the other thing, obviously, is the short turnaround in the City playing last night, kick-off Saturday lunchtime. That's the sort of combination that managers dread, isn't it? They don't want to play the late Champions League game, then the early kickoff on the Saturday. So you could see managed minutes for Haaland. I think he'll start, but you could see managed minutes if they're ahead And therefore, Kane over 90 minutes versus Leicester, I think he's a captain, opportunity. Even if I don't captain him tomorrow and I bottle out, I will captain him in game week 11 when City play Liverpool. So having him there already as a captain option for 3 weeks' time when City play against Liverpool, when you probably don't want to captain either Salah or Haaland, I like him for that reason as well, and that's another reason to have him there. And also with Kane, for me, I've not got great team value because I sort of don't jump on players early for price rises and that. And so on this wildcard, it's hurt me a little bit, but I actually have some money left over with having Kane over De Bruyne. There's about a 0.8 difference, and it just gives me that slight little comfortable feeling that if something goes wrong in the international break, I can make a transfer and not be left with a 0.0 in the bank, which I made the mistake at the beginning of the season of having that in terms of optimizing the team. So there's quite a lot of reasons to have Kane, that I've squared off in my head versus the De Bruyne option. So for me, that's enough to say I'm committed to going without Salah for 4 weeks. When Liverpool blank, one nice fixture against Brighton, then Arsenal and City. You can gamble on Salah not smashing it in those 4 weeks versus Leicester at home, the derby against Arsenal where Kane has a great record, Brighton away, and then Everton at home to captain him. I think I'll get more points out of that option. So there's the case for the defence for Kane.
I'll give you a case.
Quite happy to hear the De Bruyne argument because he was in my draft all week until last night. So let's go De Bruyne.
We'll start with the structure, right? I think one thing I don't like about picking Kane is who he acts as a blocker to. Because realistically, that's I feel like your second spot is going to be Mitrovic, right? And even if it's not, if it's Isaac or Tony, Kane acts as a blocker then to one of Isaac, Tony, or Mitrovic, which I really don't like because I think all three are such great prospects. Mitrovic obviously has a fantastic fixture run from now on. Isaac has Bournemouth this week and then a good run, and then after Tony faces Arsenal, he has Bournemouth next week, and then another pretty decent run. Not as good as the other two, but it's decent nonetheless. And even if you wanted to go Tony, Isaac this week and Tony next week and play very aggressively, I know a few people did that with the 8 million mids early on. I think that's definitely something you can consider. So that's one thing I don't like as a blocker. Then you look at the midfield replacements for De Bruyne, and I just don't think in like relative terms they're anywhere as adequate as the forward line. You can go for someone like Sir Maximum, I agree. But even though he's 6.4 million, at times he struggled with his end product. I know he got 3 assists against City, but he's not someone who's going to get you 15 goals and 15 assists in a season. And you don't really expect him to necessarily haul, I'd say, in a game. I think if you do, it's kind of a one-off. And then you have the injury problems and the expected minutes problems. So that's why I kind of prefer De Bruyne in terms of structure. Now, in terms of how long you're going to hold him, my plan with De Bruyne is not the same with Kane. So he won't be there in game week 11 because I believe it's Wolves, then it's Man United, then Southampton in game week 10, right? So I think in game week 10 I will take him out. After game week 10 I'll take him out and then I'll restructure it. So then I can go to someone like maybe a Sterling for a week, maybe have Son for game week 11. Like you said, you want to captain Kane in game week 11 if Son's returned back to form, or if Kulusevski's really good, looking really good, I can get him. If I haven't got Zaha by that point, I can replace him with Zaha, which I'm more than happy to do. Yes, there's a big difference in price, but Zaha's looked great on the fixture. They're fantastic, right? And then the last thing in terms of De Bruyne's actual points, we just need to cast our mind back to Wolves last season and what he did there. Now I know obviously it's not the same game, but I know Wolves have only conceded 4 goals, but I think with their 4 at the back system this season, I'm quite confident City can put at least 2 past them. And I know it's that time, like you said, late Champions League, early Saturday kickoff, which is like the dreaded curse. But I think if all teams to be fine, it'd be City to get the job done. So I'm quite bullish on De Bruyne. The United fixture, I don't think it's too bad. United are normally good against good teams, though. And then Southampton after is a nice fixture.
Yeah, they both got a derby, haven't they? Both Kane and De Bruyne. So it's not
Yeah.
there. Yes, you've reminded me. It was actually my birthday last year, Jian. I did the match of the day challenge. Fergie will remember. I didn't. I went out with my daughter to the theatre. Didn't know the City result. Came home and stuck it on at 11:30, and he got me 60 points. The captain.
I was the same. Yeah,
so that's basically the reason he was the kind of the first name in my wild card to begin with. So yeah, there's can he do it again? Wouldn't that be amazing?
So you're going to betray him after you got your 60 points.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, obviously may well go back to him, but great arguments. Where do you sit, Fergie? Are you in the middle somewhere, or are you in De Bruyne camp or Kane camp?
I think I'm in the camp of. I agree with you that I think Kane could have a good week. I'm not seeing enough of Spurs at the moment. Again, this week in the Champions League and the way they've been playing, I think if Kane was on form and if Spurs were banging in goals, I think I would go the Kane route. But I think I'm erring more towards structure. Mark from Black Box has made a really good point in the chat around. He says he's with Rich in terms of Kane captain. I don't think he's got Haaland, but the issue is the mid-price options up top are stronger than the midfielders, and I kind of agree with that. And I also think it's an easy route back to Salah as well if you wanted from KD, especially in game week 12. So I think I agree with Jan in terms of I look at Isaac, maybe wrongly, right, Rich? And you are right. He hasn't really done anything in the Premier League yet. But I look at Isaac and Mitrovic, especially this game week. And I wouldn't be surprised if both of them return. I wouldn't be surprised if De Bruyne returns against Wolves, Haaland returns against Wolves. I don't think there's enough upside for me on Kane this week to justify having to maybe restructure later down the line, if that makes sense. I think if it was, I think it is a good fixture. And I think if Spurs, if Spurs had gone to Sporting midweek, Kane scored a couple of goals, I think I'd be all over it, and I think I'd captain him. I just don't think there's enough this week for, I think there's enough better options in terms of Isaac, Mitrovic to kind of
This week I think it's true. I think the other thing, if you're going Kane, and the arguments are there, is to make sure that you set up a structure that is conservative in terms of the transfers you're going to need over the coming 3 or 4 weeks, because if you, for instance, have got to go and get Zaha in game week 10, you've got to go and move money around to get Liverpool players back. You want to make sure that you can at least save a transfer in game week 9 or 10, so that you've got the two in the bank to make that move back to the Liverpool, come off Kane in game week 12. You can't be banking too many transfers with your structure. Hence, when you see my draft, you see it's tried to cover that and be stingy with transfers for a couple of weeks, because it is the longer pole, basically.
I think
the last thing.
Oh no, you go, mate. You go, Jan.
Okay, so the last thing I'd say about Kane is just something I thought of is that one way that he gets a lot of points is Son. We've obviously seen they're the most successful duo of all time in the Premier League. And I have a few theories on why Son's been doing as well this season. But one thing is, I think he's maybe slightly restricted this season with Conte changing a few patterns of play. So he's not as accessible to Kane. And I think that's one thing that is just a slight negative, the fact that his counterpart essentially isn't firing.
I would agree with that. And I also think, I know someone was brought off yesterday, early-ish, and people are reading either way into that. They think, he's brought off early to play on Saturday. Some would think, well, he's brought off early. They hadn't scored to try and boost the attack. And I'm not sure where that sits. I would be really tempted to go with Son as a 1 game week punt, maybe move on to De Bruyne next week, but you don't know if he's going to start now, right? So I think the argument is Kane or De Bruyne rather than Son personally. So, but yeah, I do think with De Bruyne's 4 goals against Wolves, I don't really like these 1 game sort of stats that kind of happen. Obviously, Man City are different now in the way they, in the way they play, set up, the way they attack. Wolves' defense, if you remember, Wolves at the time, one of the reasons why Rich plumped for De Bruyne against Wolves were conceding left, right, and centre. They're just not doing that at the moment. So, but I also think that De Bruyne could easily match Kane in terms of output, given the fact that when he returns, he's amazing on bonus, extra point for the clean sheet, extra point for the goal, and all this lark. So I think that's why I'm going for De Bruyne. I think he can match Kane this week, and I think that going forward, I would rather have that structure. So
you make a good point about bonus, definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, interesting points there, and great to have, obviously, the diverse views, which is what we want. Just a quick look ahead to Wildcard and Game Week 9. So all we've talked about so far, obviously, is looking at Game Week 8 onwards so far. Just got the fixtures up for Game Week 9 onwards. One player we haven't mentioned yet, and and because even if we picked him in our wildcard, we're not going to play him to at least 9 or even Game Week 10, is Zaha. So Palace come out top from Game Week 9 onwards. Fixtures are absolutely fabulous for Palace going forward. One thing I did notice, because I did look, I think Gahi actually is in my current wildcard draft, but actually Palace's stats, I think, are the worst, either second or third worst over the season. Interestingly, I know they've had some hard fixtures. I think they've played, I want to say, Liverpool, and they played Man City. But statistically, their defence has actually been really, really poor, which I was quite surprised at when I looked. Yeah, they're really the only team which comes kind of into focus other than the team you mentioned already. And this is why, Fulham still up there, Leicester, Bournemouth, West Ham, Liverpool, Newcastle, Villa. So, a lot of teams we mentioned already. But Palace seem to be the one that come into it, which is why I think the Game Week 8 and 9 wildcard, there's not much between them. Are you guys going in early on Zaha on your wildcard, or will you be waiting a couple of weeks? Jian, what do you think?
Yep.
Yeah, just before I forget about Palace's defence, like you said, they've had Arsenal, who looked great in the first game week, and then Liverpool and City in their first 6. So that's half the game. So I imagine that skews it considerably. So I'm in the camp of going no Zaha. The reason being, firstly, obviously he's got a blank game week this week. So that's just a lot of money essentially invested in a spot where you can have other players who have really good fixtures, like Bowen. And it's just going to have to sit on the bench. And you have to play Andreas Pereira, which I don't think is a bad option, but I'd rather my bigger assets play. So that's one thing. Next thing, then you have to hold him over the whole international break. Now, I'm sure we'll be fine. Nothing will really happen. But if I'm going to get a player in, I want him to play straight away, especially with an international break coming after. I want to get as much utility from him as I can. And then finally, the fact that he's got Chelsea after. Now, I'm a Chelsea fan personally, and I saw small improvements in Chelsea yesterday. Obviously, Potter's had very limited time, and we've only seen one game, and that's all we will see until the next deadline. But in Chelsea's game yesterday, it looks slightly better, right? So I think that's another thing. It's not an easy fixture, even though we haven't been great this season by any stretch. It's not an easy fixture. So then, yes, after that, I think it's a great time to get on him. But I think if you do go with the double 8 million spot, like a Maddison Bowen, then you can always pivot to him anyway. Yeah. You can always go Bowen to him or Maddison to him if they're not firing. So I just think with the blank and then Chelsea and a IB sandwiched in between, I think you're missing out on a lot of points essentially.
What's your thoughts, Rich?
Well, they may be slightly skewed by the fact that I had him in my team anyway. So he was in my game week 6 squad. I think I brought him in for the run of 3 or 4 games, and 2 of which have now been called off. So he was in for Brighton, and he was in for the other game that got cancelled last weekend. And so he was in my squad anyway. And I haven't really had he's a very frustrating player to own. Historically, we all see his potential. He has everything. He can score in bursts and win lots of penalties. He does get booked a lot, on the downside, but very good at home. Talisman player again, and it all seems to be about talisman at the moment. So lots to go for, and I want him, and that's kind of why. Getting back to the point I made about Kane, if you go put that money in Kane, you've got the option to have 3 8 million-ish or 7 to 8 million mids. So that whole sort of spread the funds option comes open to you. And then when I'm ranking them, I think I'd rather have him over Maddison and Bowen, over a run of games. So I'm quite happy at the moment to bench him this week. It's the opposite of what Jian has said, and just sit him alongside Reece James on the bench, have him there, not have to waste a precious transfer bringing him in game week 10 or 11 when I'm already looking to move Arsenal City players out because of the blank and move Liverpool players in. Transfers are going to be so precious once you've used your wild card that for me it's an opportunity to save a transfer going the Kane route and have him there on the bench. It's not as easy to do that if you've got the the De Bruyne option, because you've only got 2 spots, and as Jian says, you've got to be happy playing Andreas Pereira away at Forest. But great fixture for Fulham, I keep he's like my Smith Rowe this year. I keep benching his points. He keeps on assisting. He keeps on taking the corners for Mitrovic, and yeah, I think he will return against Forest. So very happy to play him. And the problem is, sorry to rabbit on, you can make the team too strong, so you give yourself a benching headache if you're not prepared to play Andreas. So having that player for the longer term stored up on your bench, I don't have a problem with that at all.
I wonder if with Andreas, that the reason we keep benching, because if you watch him in terms of highlights, in terms of eye test, even statistically, if you look at him, I still think we'd be really interested if he was like a 5.5 million player that we think of playing him more. I wonder if we'd only bench him because he's that, because of the price point he is.
Yeah,
I think
that's a really good point, psychological thing.
Yeah, it is. We've now got predicted points from Gameweek 9 to 11. Again, a lot of the usual suspects in there. A few I'd like to pull out. I haven't put in Gameweek 12 obviously because it's skewed with the it's obviously skewed because of the postponement of Gameweek 12. But Foden comes in 5th, 16 points. We haven't mentioned Foden yet. Reece James comes in 7th with 15 points. Bruno Fernandes comes in interestingly. Raheem Sterling is another one we haven't mentioned yet. So what are your thoughts on Foden and Sterling are probably two which they a little bit awkward with price points maybe, and definitely City, a lot of people are going to have Cancelo, De Bruyne and Haaland, and Sterling as well. Obviously being Chelsea fans, your insight would be good. Jian, can I ask you first about your thoughts on those players?
Yeah, sure. We'll touch on Foden first. I managed to catch the highlights of the City game now, and Grealish and Mahrez were both really poor. So I think, even though I feel like Foden hasn't been great this season compared to his standards last season, but I'm pretty sure he's still nailed now in that side, or as close as you can be in Pep Roulette. Because like I said, Grealish was poor, and I don't really think Haaland and Mahrez can play together, simply because it's kind of incorporates 2 poor presses in a side, and a Pep side doesn't have that, to be honest. He just won't stand for it. So I think that's one reason why I'm pretty sure he'll get a lot of minutes, right? So in that front, yeah, it's good. But then, like you said, it blocks a triple City in terms of Haaland, De Bruyne, Cancelo, which I don't like. And I think maybe just because he hasn't been as sharp, I think I'd much rather use the extra money and get De Bruyne. So personally, for me, especially given the fact that there's other great 8 million options, he's not one to go for me.
What do you think about it? If you've gone Kane, do you think he's a good option for me?
No, because I think Maddison and Bowen are the 2 best 8 million options personally. And then I still like Zaha as an asset. I just think there's a little bit of a gap between Maddison, Bowen and him because of that. But I'd rather have someone like Saka this week, because I know that he's pretty much going to play every game. And to be honest, even though he's got the North London derby next, that's not something I'd be too concerned about as an Arsenal attacking asset. You can definitely get in some points there. So that's that. With Sterling, though, on the contrary, I'm bullish on him, and I really like him. So yesterday, like I talked about, Chelsea played an asymmetrical 3-5-1-1. And even though him and Reece James were classified as wing backs, he was certainly higher up and had less defensive responsibility than a normal wing back would when, for example, Chilwell or Cucurella were to play there. And he just is, to be honest, Chelsea's best attacker. Like, look at his record in Man City. Even with minutes managed and a lot of minutes missing, he scored a ridiculous amount of goals and had great output. So I think of all the Chelsea assets with a good run coming up and a pretty decent price tag, slightly awkward, but still decent, I really like Sterling. And he's someone who's got an incredibly high ceiling. You wouldn't be surprised if he scored a hat-trick in a game. So I think he's a good option, but Foden's one I'd be a bit wary of.
Interesting. What's your take, Rich, on these 2 players?
Yeah, particularly, I think Foden is an option for the 3rd City spot if you're not going De Bruyne, But again, because of this game week 12, you've got to watch the number of Arsenal and City players you've got in your wild card this week. So Saka again, I agree. He's another. They're all about 8 million. Actually. There's loads of them, and basically, you don't want to have. I think 4 is the maximum you should have. From those 2 teams. I think if you've got 5 or 6, then you're pushing it because you're storing up so much maintenance for game week 11 and 12 there. So I think I like Saka. You know, from a stats perspective, it screams Saka above all of these other options we're talking about. But again, you're therefore, most people are doubling with Martinelli there. Is that right? You know, yeah, good fixture this week, but not sure about doubling up when I'm supposed to be getting rid of him soon. Foden, again, almost feels like a coverage pick because I haven't got De Bruyne, and it's short term. So but having that fourth spot in the City and Arsenal assets that you're prepared to come off for a Zaha or another option, that's fine. I think that's fine as long as you know you're going to come off it in the next 4 weeks. Then that's okay, because most of us will keep. After that cross last night, most of us will keep Cancelo, most of us will keep Martinelli, most of us will keep Haaland, right? So that's going to be your bench in game week 12. So who do you come off? You come off Saka, or you come off Foden, or you come off De Bruyne.
I think you make a really interesting point about the game week 12 postponement. And I've seen a strategy discussed which involves, especially if you have De Bruyne, selling him and Cancelo, and reverting back to Trent and Salah. Obviously, in game week 12, I believe they've got West Ham at home, which isn't the worst fixture from an attacking point of view, which they can both contribute. And then it gets better. It's like Forest after that. So I think that's maybe a strategy there. Downgrading someone just to facilitate a few extra funds, maybe a Bowen to Zaha, and then going De Bruyne and Cancelo up to Salah and Trent.
Yeah, interesting stuff there, guys. Really good. I think Jian for me is kind of a lock regardless. I think he's, I think for his price still, his potential, even looking last night, he's looking good last night as well. I think Sterling, you get so they're away to Palace, I believe, aren't they, in game week 9. So I think you kind of get to wait and see, because we're not going to get to see him play before then. Again, now we obviously we looked last night, but we're not. You can't draw too many conclusions for one game. But in terms of structure, I do quite like the thought of having Sterling. He's that really awkward price point where he could be incredibly explosive and low owned though as well. I think is a point I'm trying to make there. I really do like it. And if you went for someone like Bailey, for example, you could potentially jump on Sterling as well, instead of having instead of like Maddison and Bowen, Bailey and Sterling, for example, I think could or someone else along. Speaking of kind of lower price midfielders as well. So I've got the total expected points up now as the final part of this from game weeks 1 to 7 so far for the whole season so far. As you'd expect, Haaland top, Mitrovic second, Kane third, Tony fourth, Martinelli, then De Bruyne. They've been the kind of top guns this season. Pascal Gross, interestingly, seventh, as we know, he's not really an option now. Obviously, they have the blank, but also the fixtures tighten up as well. Jesus, Salah, and then we come into Zaha. Gordon is up there. I think he's 11th overall. We haven't mentioned him yet. Even though you think of Everton at the moment, and you think, oh my goodness, the fixtures are not that bad. He's been in pretty good form. He's won. Solly March is up there, 5 million. Obviously, we're not going to go for March because you just mentioned. And Mbeumo is there as well. 31 expected points so far, but you're probably not going to go for Mbeumo when you've got Tony as their position is the same. Gordon is the one I was just going to ask you guys. Has he crossed your mind at all for your wildcard teams?
Yeah, so I've actually had a few GMs, and quite a few people have had him. And I was quite surprised when I started to look at it. The fixture run's a bit. It's not great. West Ham and Southampton. I don't particularly like the West Ham fixture. The Southampton one's a good one. Then after you got a United who look a lot more solid than Spurs after, followed by Newcastle and Palace, which aren't easy.
Yeah.
And I just think with Everton, who struggle in general to create a lot of chances. Yes, he scored a couple of goals recently, and they were very well taken. But for him to score regularly and return regularly, he'll have to take those chances very well every single game. And that's just a very difficult skill in itself. If people watch the Bayern Barca game, Lewandowski missed some really good chances, and he's arguably the best striker in the world. So I think just with him, it's more of a case of he has to do so much to return. Whereas with other players, they just have to have one good moment. Whereas with him, it's a little bit more difficult because of how Everton are playing at the moment.
Fair. He has been having a lot of shots, I would say. It's not kind of, one shot, one goal. He is he's right up there in terms of shots and shots in the box over the season. But, it is a good point you make there. Rich, has Gordon kind of crossed your wild card path or?
I had him towards the end of last season, when he was a bargain, sort of 4.5 million mid. And he's a good player, but Everton just haven't got enough good players in my view. So I can never see them scoring. Now Richarlison's gone, I can never really see them scoring more than one goal in a game. And therefore I just don't fancy them. I haven't done from the start. I haven't had any of their players. I think Lampard will get sacked eventually, and he's doing better than I thought he would. Though they've done okay over the first 6 weeks, but he's still not really a buy for me. No. Seen some drafts with him in, but there's just not a lot around at that sort of 5.5 mil bracket, is there? Really, there's very little. You're almost better off going down to Bailey at 4.7.
Yeah. Fair enough. Thank you for that, gents. Before we look at then at our wildcard drafts, let's just quickly have a chat about the captain this game. We've already had a bit of contention around it. The three metrics we kind of look at, so odds checker, have Haaland at 4-6 on, so by far the favourite for anytime goal scorer. Kane 10-11. Interesting, they have Isaac 13-10, so Isaac is their third choice for anytime goal scorer for this weekend. I would have to do some proper scouting there. I'm gonna have to go watch some footage here. Buddy. The only thing with Isaac is Wilson could be returning soon. Have you guys have any thoughts on how that may affect? Obviously Isaac cost them a fortune, right? I just can't see him being benched. Do you think they play two up front or?
It's difficult because Eddie Howe's 4-3-3 has been so good. He's been so successful since he came in. So I'd wonder if he'd want to change that, because you don't really need to change winning formulas as such. It's been so good. Why would you? So maybe he does go out wide. But you make a good point about how they spent a fortune on it. It's like 70 million quid, and
they're not benching that, are they?
Yeah, unless you're Chelsea, you don't do that.
Exactly.
To someone, yeah.
Cool. Rich, any thoughts on that at all, or?
Yeah, I like Wilson. He's a bit of a troll, isn't he? He's very injury prone. Again, scores in bursts, and you never know whether you're going to have a good run from him or not. But yeah, I do expect him to come back and lead the line, just because of the his experience and his relationship with Eddie. So yeah, I think for that reason, I initially sort of haven't really given Isak a lot of time.
Yeah.
And want to see more of him, but it's a plum fixture. And again, if you're looking to go into that international break, feeling good and having got an immediate gain from that wild card, which is really kind of what you want,
exactly.
Isn't it? And he's got to be reconsidered. And I think for me, I'm a bit. If I go the De Bruyne route, I'm a bit short. I think I'm 0.1 short or something on having Tony up front. So if I go for Isaac, I can solve that. Yeah. Solve that problem. Yes, it prevents me having to this ridiculous thing I'm contemplating, which is going for Everson, to stretch it to 3.9 at the back, so that I can. I'm trying to bring a non-playing backup keeper in. Just think of what could possibly go wrong there, guys. And in order to, even like we all know Ward's not very good, right? But at least he plays, right? At the moment, we're all predicting he's going to get dropped soon, But that narrative fits, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it could solve a lot of issues for me. I'll take a look this afternoon.
In terms of the poll, 64% of the vote went for Haaland, so he's going to be a popular captaincy pick this weekend. 23 went for Kane, and then pretty split elsewhere. In terms of the hub predicted points, Heung-min Son actually came up top, 7.3. Wow. It's just worth pointing out minutes. So we have him down as expected minutes of 82. Now, if you think that is going to be less, which I probably think it might be, I would probably say if he does start maybe 70, 75, then obviously, you can use your own discretion to kind of nudge that down. Haaland and Kane both on 7.1, De Bruyne 6.3, Isaac 5.3. But it's probably Haaland versus Kane, I would probably say is the discussion, both on who to go out of Kane and De Bruyne for wildcard, and then who to captain. Now, the more we've talked about this, and there's been some comments in the chat which are quite interesting, around, people think that Alvarez might get, they think Alvarez might get some minutes over Haaland this weekend, for example. Haaland's played a lot, he's played a lot of minutes recently. I think he played 89 last night. Did he play 90?
The game before was Villa, right? Was that Villa?
Or it was
You played 90 minutes against Villa because it was a 1-1 draw. They don't take him off unless they're winning, do they?
Yeah, so just something there maybe. Whereas Kane, we know will probably get at least 80-85 minutes, and the only reason they would take him off early is if they were winning, in which case you think he's done the damage already. So, in terms of the best captain objectively, gents, obviously not with your actual wild cards in mind, who do you think is the best captain for game week 8?
I'd go Haaland. I'd say one thing about the expected minutes is that obviously with the international break coming up and Haaland, he's not going to be at the World Cup. I wonder if he could maybe use that time as kind of a period of a rest off and just have some communication with the national team in that sense. And I just think with the form he's in, I just don't want to go against him.
It's hard to go against him. What a goal last night. Absolutely insane.
It was unbelievable. It's like that scene, isn't it, in the Game of Thrones when all the everything, he's standing there in front of all those horses that are coming towards him, and it's just literally, just like that's what you're doing if you're going Kane captain, right? You're going right, sod you, I'm gonna do it. I don't care what happens to me.
Exactly.
I think I've done it a few times, and every single time I went against Haaland, I got burned. So I think he's genuinely the best option this week. I don't mind the Kane captaincy shout at all. I was wondering if there was a case for De Bruyne and I could go a little bit differential, but I'm not particularly sure there is. So I think Haaland or Kane, but I think Haaland edges it for me.
If there's someone you want in terms of captaincy, it's not for me. It's not De Bruyne playing around the edge of the box or just in the final third. You want Haaland from the penalty spot in the 6-yard box, which is just where he is. He doesn't even have to play well, does he? He doesn't have to play well. And, everyone talks about his touches. He's there to tap the ball into the net, which is what he's an expert at. And that's what gets FPL points. So it's hard to argue. And that finished last night. I was trying to think last night of anyone else who could have scored that goal, because you never see people doing that. And the closer I could probably get to is Ibrahimovic, when he was in his prime, this kind of, his acrobatics. But I can't think of any, you can't imagine Harry Kane or, anyone else in the Premier League even attempting someone as audacious as that.
No. Well, it could have been ruled out for, dangerous height, couldn't it? But the thing is the defender was nowhere near it, was it?
Yeah.
There was no head within 5 feet. So therefore, it's like just a clear goal, isn't it? So, but normally a high foot like that, the referees come down on it, don't they? But it's like, it was amazing.
It just shows though how wide, he's displayed already, haven't he? The kind of his, I can't think of the word. The different array or kind of goals he can score. He can just score left foot, right foot, centre of the goal, on the goal line. He's just all arms and legs and head, and he just get anything on it, and he will just get it in there, and he will score.
Yeah, he's just got an instinctive ability, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is impressive.
So, Rich, are you still kind of bullish on Kane, or are you more swerved to Haaland?
I'd probably say 75-25. I've got a friend of mine, he's a Spurs fan. He's got his birthday celebration on Saturday evening, and he's got a big gathering at the pub. So it's a sort of part of the sort of enjoy the game kind of aspect is urging me to captain Kane so I can go and have a beer and enjoy it in the pub, and having hopefully the City game's not done too much damage to me, and you go in then and you can think, well, I have a really good night on this. It's partly all those circumstantial events that's making me think, oh yeah, I might.
I quite like that though, Rich. That's how I tend to play the game kind of nowadays. Is to enjoy the football and enjoy FPL, and
exactly. Kind of like it is kind of the reason we play, right?
This is it.
Constant torture.
Just before we move on to our drafts, Fergie is a punt this week. Not very exciting this week. I did have a good look, and I couldn't really find anyone who I was, to try and really unearth a real gem. But I have found someone 2% owned, who I think has got the potential to have a really good week this week, and that is Ollie Watkins, home to Southampton. I was quite surprised when I saw his ownership was very low. It's probably because he's up against, kind of Mitrovic and Tony, whoever else, but only 2% owned. 7 shots, 3 on target, 7 in the box, 2 big chances. He's been looking good. I think he was benched once earlier on in the season. Samson's defence is not actually, again, statistically as bad as I thought it was going to be, but I did struggle this week. So without going for a total donkey, I thought Ollie Watkins is maybe, if you're looking for a 1 week punt, obviously aside from the obvious Isaac and people like that, I think Watkins could be.
You gave him a shout earlier, didn't you, Jian?
Did, yeah. It's not really, but I was surprised how low his ownership was. It would have been Isaac, but we spent a while talking about. I couldn't have then gone. I think Isaac is my punt for this week because he's too obvious. I would probably go Isaac, but Watkins looks a pretty good shout for this week.
Got a good fixture.
Shame you can't go Mark Rocker like last time.
Oh, do you know what? That now that's a shout. That is a shout. Like that. That is one. No one expected it, and it's just a shame. Obviously, it didn't get to play out. I would mention my one from 2 weeks ago. Brennan Johnson scored, and my one from the week before, Visser has scored two in two games as well. They're doing all right.
Yeah, they are. They're just not quite happening immediately, are they? They sort of come in for you over a 3-4 week period.
And they're proper punts, they are, aren't they? Excuse the language there. Rich, we've got your current wildcard team on screen. Just want to chat us through it.
Okay. Yeah, I think, as I can't quite see it, I think it's. Let me just go to it. Just give me 1 second and I'll scroll down to it. It is Pope in goal, Cancelo, Trippier, the ubiquitous Cancelo and Trippier. And then just because of my structure, I've currently got Neco Williams playing at home to Fulham. Not completely happy about that. Playing Andreas Pereira in midfield. Martinelli keeps his place. Maddison and Bowen come in as the well-discussed 8 million mids. And then up front, we've got Haaland, captain on this draft. Mitrovic and Kane as vice captain. So that really is, we've discussed it a lot, allows me to bring Zaha in and bench him. So that's effectively, trying to save a transfer in game week 9 and 10. And I have James as the other player from Chelsea that I'd like to carry through for the rest of the season. I've spent a little bit of the money on a slightly safer defensive sub, Kufal at 4.4 from West Ham. Just not quite sure about Emerson. Lots of people going for Emerson, and I just think that Cresswell is one of Moyes' favourites, and I think he'll come back into the side when he's back, and therefore you'll be stuck with a non-playing fifth defender. But I think he'd probably be all right for this week. Again, I'm going to watch the West Ham game this evening to see if there's any clues there. But that's my Kane draft. I would say I did this on purpose because it would have been a bit dull to present 3 De Bruyne and Kane drafts to you all and talk through the same template. So I did put this in. I am 80% on the Kane structure, but I am going to still have a look at it, and may well go back to De Bruyne as the option before the deadline tomorrow. But yeah, that's where I stand at the moment.
I think the first thing that strikes me here, Rich, and please obviously take this as intended, because I think a lot of us have done the same. But it seems that you picked a wild card team, and you're going to be playing players like Neco Williams, maybe even like Andreas Pereira, maybe Maddison, maybe even Bowen. You're going to be playing them this week when I don't think any of them personally, maybe Andreas aside, are actually good picks this week, which just begs the question, have we actually wildcarded a week early? because those picks are not ones you've brought in for this week, are they?
No, they're not. This is very much a longer term view. It's not all about this week. You can make that team better for this week, but then you're not necessarily, you're booking in a lot of transfers for the future. I know you're playing devil's advocate.
No. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is you could have taken a hit this week, optimized this week particularly, and then wildcarded next week. I suppose is the argument.
Yeah, I wanted to.
But me and Adam told you all of it.
It was a pretty easy decision. I just had, I thought having 9 with 2 free transfers and then still being 2 players short. I just thought this was enough to do it this week. I'm surprised there hasn't been much, price movement yet. They keep holding back Pope's price.
Hopefully this evening they'll price out all the game week 9 wild cards.
Exactly, but there hasn't been a lot of movement in the markets, and and obviously we've still got the lot who wildcarded last week who've had a week's worth of extra money coming in. I don't like to moan, but there is about $1 million difference now between my team values.
Get the violin out.
Exactly. Exactly. So there's not much I can do, but yeah, the Zaha thing is a patient move, because obviously you don't necessarily need him till game week 10, and I get the bring him in later shouts, but he's there so that I can play patiently after the break. So that's my ploy at the moment.
Fair, Rich. Thank you very much for that. Jian, we now have your team on screen. Do you want to talk us through it?
Yeah, so pretty standard double defense with Pope and Trippier. They both have really high ceilings. That's what I like about them. So it's in the good fixtures, especially they can haul. Triple City, Cancelo, De Bruyne, Haaland. We touched upon that earlier a lot. Just they look fantastic, all of them, and good fixtures in the next 3, I'd say overall. So I like that. Then we've also talked about Isaac, Mitrovic, Bowen a lot. Then we'll just go into the last 3 who are starting. Emerson, I picked him over Fofana, over Nico Williams in my side, because I didn't want a double-edged sword. If I'm going to start Mitrovic, I don't want Nico Williams as well to limit my ceiling. And I think he will start this week, because I don't think Cresswell's back. And I know that he did score in the Europa Conference League. So I'm happy to play Emerson. Martinelli provides such good value. And I know people talk about bad fixtures for Arsenal, but sandwiched in between all of that is Leeds in game week 11. Yeah. And then from 13 onwards, it's nice. And he can definitely return against Tottenham and Liverpool. I mean, Liverpool's high line, if any player in that Arsenal side can exploit it, it's Martinelli, especially with Trent's maybe positional issues to an extent. I love Leicester's fixture run after Tottenham. I don't think Tottenham's that bad a fixture. And Maddison's always got a high ceiling. Combine that with talisman theory, and I think he's a great option. Then just looking at the bench, like Rich was talking about earlier, I've got Iverson instead of Ward. I couldn't afford the team without the 0.1, so I had to go then. I don't think it'll be too much of a problem. I'm pretty sure.
Do you think there's a chance? What do you think the chances are that he gets dropped, Ward? Because I mean, I've just lost 5-2, right? Or they've lost all 6 games or something, haven't they? So therefore, got to be thinking about making some changes. I know he hasn't got a very big squad anymore, but surely the keeper is one of the things you'd try, right?
Yeah, like I remember watching Ward away at Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup, and when people said he was a good keeper at the start of the season, I was a bit surprised. It's kind of why I didn't go for him. I wasn't very impressed, and there's not been much to be impressed by him this season. I know obviously the defense carries a big factor, but just the presence he kind of has and the way he tries to save the goals, I'm not impressed. So yeah, he might get dropped. I saw Roger's comments about essentially backing Ward publicly, but I think you'd expect any manager to do that. So maybe in a few games, maybe he's on his last chance. We'll see. Andreas is the 4.5 because at that value is exceptional. Reece James we touched upon earlier. Really high ceiling, good fixtures. The only thing about Reece James that frustrates me is he gets booked a lot more than people realise, and he gets himself in these kind of scraps, which is quite annoying. And then with Chelsea's like concede obviously like yesterday, for example, just dominate the game and then concede. There's a lot of 1-pointers in there, which is frustrating. But with someone who has such a high ceiling, I think you have to go with. Then finally, the one that's really frustrating me, and I think it's like you mentioned earlier, the 4 defender spot that's making this wildcard really difficult. I've got Fofana at the moment because I drafted this before the Chelsea lineup came out. Now, I think at 4.4 million, he's exceptional value, but if he's not going to play every game, then I don't really want him. And I think I might just pivot to a Palace defender or maybe Safal, one of the two.
I'd be amazed.
Who do you think though? Yeah, sorry, mate. Who do you think is the alternative to him then? You think Sufal and Guehi, is it? Would be the
I think option? Mark Guehi's. I think I'd put him maybe slightly above. I think because he's a 4th defender spot, and I won't have to play him this week or next week. And when it comes around to game week 10, and if I need to play him whenever, he'll have a good fixture, like a great fixture. So I think I'm gonna go with him, and I think I'll do that move today.
Okay, good pick.
Yeah, with it's a strange one with Fofana. I know he wasn't Potter's signing, but one, he's however much he was, 70-odd million. But 2, he's also he's an excellent footballer, and I just I can't see him not playing. So I'm having a bit of a fight with myself as well on Fofana and Emerson and things like that. I haven't quite made my mind up yet. Obviously, Guehi is the safe one, but I did notice that Palace's stats, as I say, weren't great, but to your point earlier, Jian's really good point. They have played some really, really hard games, haven't they? So, just
one thing.
on
Just one quick last thing about Fofana. Obviously, Potter's a very big fan of Cucurella. He has an excellent relationship with him. You saw that at Brighton. And with him playing that left centre-back role yesterday, I wonder if the two other central defender spots are going to be between Silva, Koulibaly, and Fofana. I'd say Silva's definitely the best defender out of those three. So he starts when he's fit. And then maybe those two kind of fight for the last spot with Sterling if he's playing that new Trossard type of role. So I wouldn't really want that if I know that he could play one, bench the other. So that's just something to know.
No, that's fair. I've got my draft up now on screen. Very, similar to what we've been talking about, quite similar to your draft. So Pope, Cancelo, Trippier. You've got Emerson. I did do a bit of research this morning, and I'm not convinced he'll hold his place. I do think if he does play, I think he's a fantastic option. Great fixtures, great, good sort of attacking threat as well. But I'm not convinced he's going to play. So I'm probably going to dump Emerson, I think, personally. I didn't realise Sufar was only 4.4, so I am interested in that. Andreas, De Bruyne, Martinelli. I've got Bailey in at the moment, but I have got 3 million in the bank. It's more of that, I can move from Bailey straight to Zaha in kind of a week or two. So it's because otherwise I would have to play Maddison this week, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I also don't really want to wildcard, and then if one of my players doesn't play, not have anyone coming in off the bench to get me any points either, because that just seems a bit counterproductive.
You got to have one sub there, haven't you?
This is it. So at the moment it would be Maddison on the bench first, and I've got James and I've got Gahey in as it stands. But like I said, I do have 3 million in the bank.
I would play Maddison. And I would bench one of Bailey or Andreas.
But I was looking at Bailey as well, and so his next three fixtures, Southampton, Leeds, and Forest, are pretty good. Yes, they're pretty good. So it's just the minutes. So I've got 3 million in the bank. My thinking with that, I could either go Bailey to Zaha. I've got Maddison. If Maddison doesn't really work out or he gets in, which he always does, I could just do a really easy Maddison down to Zaha. But with that 3 million in the bank, I could also potentially do kind of Gahey or Emerson back up to a premium defender if I wanted to get back in Trent or something like that. So I think I want to try and leave it reasonably flexible because all three of us are getting off Trent. All three of us look like we're going to be playing three at the back, but I do like that thing of having a bit of flexibility because as we know in football, in FPL, things change every week, right? Things always change. If I don't know, if Trent suddenly, if Liverpool beat Brighton first game back 4-0, Trent goal and assist, it'll be clamour back to Trent, for example, and things like that. So I've got De Bruyne ahead of Kane, as I mentioned earlier, because it's just that easy route back to Salah. I think if Kane's fixtures were better after this week, I would have been a bit more inclined to bring in Kane. But yeah, the kind of wild card I've tried to do is pretty flexible. Hopefully a good week this week. I've got a route to Zaha. I've got a route to someone like Trent or maybe someone else, maybe even like a Diaz from City or someone like that. And see where it goes. We've had a few questions in the chat around Perisic. A couple of mentions about Perisic. It's a tough one because of the Champions League. I think he's played 90 the last twice he's played, which I've been surprised at. I got to be honest. But obviously with Champions League, he's not playing 90 every week, is he? Between now and the World Cup, do either of you think he's going to get enough minutes in the Premier League to justify his price? Also, their fixtures, they said, after this week are not the best either. What do you guys think?
Well, I had him at the beginning, and I had him, up until I think I maybe got rid of him last week, I think. But anyway, yeah, I certainly believed in him at the beginning, and he had that 12-pointer, didn't he? So he's a good option, but he seems to be impacting Son's, contributions, doesn't he? That's one other thing to notice. So that's kind of devaluing, the Kane thing, as per Jian earlier, in terms of like their overall combined output is down. So he's not all upside. He's quite dominant, but he's not taking many shots either. I'm a bit disappointed with his kind of directness, which everyone thought he would have. So for me, I'm happy not to own him because of that rotation risk. Fergie?
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say with the rotation risk, one thing is he seems quite nailed now. I know Sessegnon's look good when he plays, but I think Conte's got a really good relationship with him, and he is a quality player. So I think he'll get the minutes. But I think it is one of the hardest points of selection this week. Leicester's not a bad fixture at all, but then it gets a bit tougher after that. I think maybe I'm more on the avoid side, but certainly it's difficult.
Yeah, I think as well, just against Leicester, they've notoriously struggled against set pieces as well, haven't they? Especially in the air. So I wonder if Perisic could be a punt. It's more after. I wouldn't be surprised if Perisic had a really good week this week. But again, it's the fixtures after which are putting me off Spurs a little bit. Could be good for Son that actually if he does start getting lots of set pieces as well. Competition time for our YouTube watchers. The game week 6 top scorer was Rashford. As far as I can see, no one had Rashford. If you did have Rashford, drop me a DM with a screenshot saying you had him. But as far as I can see, we didn't see one. Obviously, blank last game week. Top scorer for this week. So for a chance to win one of our fantastic Fantasy Football Hub mugs, you need to like the video. So firstly, please press like. Make sure you are subscribed, and then comment on who you think will be the top point scorer in game week 8 in the comments. Rich, come to you first. Can't go for Haaland, De Bruyne, or Kane. Who do you think is going to be the top point scorer in game week 8?
Mitrovic.
Oosh, can't argue with that.
Straight away.
Can't argue with that. Jian, who do you think is going to be the top point scorer in game week 8?
Just so I can rub it in a little bit later, I'm going to go Bowen.
Bowen. I just can't see it. I'm just not. I don't know. I'm not
I'm
buying
going
it.
2 goals, 1 assist. 2
goals, 1 assist for Bowen away to Everton.
And a clean sheet. 1 extra point as well.
So you think a 3-0 West Ham win away to Everton when they're playing on a Thursday night, Jan? I just can't buy it.
Yeah, I have to go Bowen. I want to back my boy.
I think I will go for... I'm going to go for Joe Willock. I know that seems a bit left field. We haven't mentioned him before, but his stats have been pretty good. I would have gone for St. Maximin if I knew he'd been fit, but he might be injured. So I'm going to back Joe Willock to score against Bournemouth. So that is my punt for this week. FPL Finding Glory, top scorer, Perisic. Joe, Perisic is actually a really good shout. I like that Perisic shout there. That's it from us for this week. We may, please keep tuned to our Twitter. If you don't follow us at FFH_Green Arrow, but we may have a very, very extra special Green Arrow bonus episode coming out tomorrow lunchtime. Can't promise anything yet, sadly, but we'll definitely know in the next 24 hours. But please keep an eye out because you will not want to miss it. If it comes off, it will be absolutely incredible. So please make sure that you keep an eye out there. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined in the chat. Those who will watch it back and those listening on the podcast version, your support as usual is very, very much appreciated. Just a reminder, our new My Team feature is now live to use yourself to pick a plan and optimize your FPL team. And our community is now live as well. If you've downloaded the Fantasy Football Hub app, click on community, join the community. It is really, really good fun. You can also do it on desktop and web. Mobile as well. There is still 30% off membership for a couple more weeks. Come and join Fantasy Football Hub and come and win at FPL. Rich, thank you so much as usual for joining us. Hopefully see you tomorrow lunchtime. Hopefully. Where can people find you, Rich?
At Rich Clarke FPL on Twitter.
Superb. And Jian, as usual, another superb performance from yourself.
Thanks.
Really, really insightful as usual. Jian, where can people find you?
You can find me at FPL_Jian Batra on Twitter as well.
And make sure that you join deadline spaces
Yeah.
every hour before the deadline.
Yeah, an hour before the deadline.
On the Fantasy Football Hub. So that's at FFH_HQ on that channel. My Twitter handle is at FFH_Fergi. So this podcast and video will be on the Fantasy Football Hub YouTube channel with the podcast versions available on all major podcast platforms. If you liked what you watched, please press the like button if you haven't already. We've still only got 100 likes. Come on, press like. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast and leave a comment. We are hoping to be back tomorrow, as I say, very, very excited if it does come off. So please come back to the channel. We may not be done yet before the international break. But other than that, we will likely be back in a couple of weeks previewing Game Week 9 with another wildcard special. Obviously, loads of people will be wildcarding again. Sorry, Rich.
No. So I was just saying there won't be a violin inside
There won't
from us,
be.
given these wild card teams.
There'll be trumpets in sight, Rich. Trumpets.
Exactly.
Where
100 pointers all the way.
Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
But we will be back previewing Game Week 9 in a couple of weeks' time with a wildcard special. We hope you all have a great Game Week 8. We hope those Game Week 8 wildcards absolutely smash it. And we hope you enjoy the international break. May all your arrows be green. Goodbye for now.